We thought we knew who they were, but these new scans of Ice Age mummies have just told us their most personal story. Some of the earliest human artwork wasn't on cave walls, but on people's skin. Today I've got 3 incredible mummies from the Ice Age that are now revealing all kinds of secrets from over 5,000 years ago. The tattooed princess who cheated time. In 1993, high up in the Altai Mountains where Russia, Mongolia, China, and Kazakhstan all shake hands and agree that it's way too cold, a tip came in about a grave robbery. Authorities reported that someone had been snatching ancient corpses from the permafrost, a crime that, as it turns out, is still a very real problem. Dr. Natalia Polozmak of Novosibirsk's Institute of Archaeology and Ethnography was charged with helping to solve the riddle, since old bones are sort of her department. But she had no idea that setting out to investigate a grave robbery would end up dropping one of the most spectacular archaeological finds of the century in her lap. Dr. Natalia and her colleagues climbed up into the Altai Mountains, to the Ukok Plateau to be exact. Today, it's a windswept, high-altitude zone of rough rocks and loose, gravelly dirt. But in '93, when Natalia went there to see the excavated graves, most of the plateau was covered in ice. Sure enough, there was an open grave on the plateau and a body missing. Somebody had clearly dug a very, very old skeleton, possibly a mummy, out of the permafrost. Natalia took one look at the scene and knew in her gut that there was more. Sure, someone may have done some light grave robbing, but Natalia, a real scientist, recognized the importance of the site and started digging herself. She expected to find at least a few bones and perhaps another couple of ancient graves. Instead, Natalia's tool struck something hard, and while finding ice in Siberia wasn't a shock, this block had a curious presence. It clearly held a secret, something big, ancient, and human. The giant popsicle. Dr. P's crew extracted the block of ice and started to thaw it out. And when I say started the thaw, I mean they attacked this thing with buckets of hot water. It's like they were doing some really weird boiling bucket challenge, dumping scalding water on the ice until the thing inside started to emerge. Forget laser drills or fancy equipment. This was DIY archaeology meets an ice sculpture contest, and it worked. Slowly but surely, a few things started to peek out of the ice block. The first visible object was a table. Yep, a table. Archaeologists had a table stuck in a block of ice. When the ice finally melted, they were looking at a table set for a feast with fatty pieces of mutton on it that had been waiting 2,500 years to be eaten. Did Natalia take a nibble? I don't know, but I like to think she at least considered it. After the table came some elaborate horse harnesses and saddle parts, and then 6 fully grown horses appeared, their muzzles dripping from the melting ice. Did I mention this block of ice was huge? Big enough to hold a feast and a fleet of ancient beasts. The horses weren't just lying dead. They were arranged in a perfect radial pattern. They had been put this way on purpose, and upon closer inspection, it became clear what happened. They were sacrificed. Each one of these majestic animals had been ritually executed with a pickaxe blow to the head. At this point, archaeologists knew that they had stumbled upon a royal burial. Someone important would be buried at the bottom of the grave. Natalia could feel it. The Ice Princess of the Pazyryk. Finally, the star of the show appeared from the wet, melting ice block. Natalia revealed the mummified body of a woman, about 25 years old. The permafrost had kept her looking eerily intact for a staggering number of years. She was still clothed in a striped wool skirt and a silk blouse. Okay, finding a mummy in a blouse is insane. This woman died 2,500 years ago, but she was found dressed up and ready to hit the town. Her striped wool skirt wouldn't even look that out of place in a modern thrift shop. The reason finding the blouse is so crazy is that fabric almost always decays very rapidly. There's a reason that scientists find stone walls, but rarely wooden walls. Any organic material tends to decay, especially clothes, and especially after over 2,000 years in the ground. The skirt and blouse are excellent examples of rare and expensive materials in the Pazyryk culture, which this enchanting ice maiden belonged to. The Pazyryk were a sort of subculture of the Scythians, dominating the steppes as nomadic horse warriors in ancient times. The Pazyryk were around from roughly the 6th and 2nd centuries BC, and to the Pazyryk, silk was a status symbol, like the Iron Age equivalent of wearing designer labels. But of course, the Ice Maiden wouldn't have worn anything else. She was, after all, the Princess of Ukok. Or at least that's what everyone's calling her. She received one of the most expensive, dramatic, and opulent burials of anyone in prehistoric Russia. Sacrificed animals, fine clothing, grave goods, the works. Not only did this princess go to the afterlife in style, but she was also a walking canvas, inked from head to toe. Inked in the afterlife. This woman had a tattoo addiction. When the Ice Maiden was first pulled out of her icy tomb, the tattoos were clearly visible on her skin. On her left shoulder, scientists identified a brilliantly blue, griffin-like creature with deer's antlers. I don't know if it's some sort of mythical beast that the Pazyryk invented, but it's not like any monster I've ever seen in a fairy tale. Along the princess's arms and fingers, researchers noticed more animal tattoos. They found sheep, a snow leopard, and more mythical beasts. The detail was so fine that you could almost hear the tattoo artist muttering over their needles 2,500 years ago. You could almost hear the animals roaring through the cold, pale, icy flesh. I should mention that the Ice Maiden isn't the only mummy with tattoos found from the Pazyryk culture. Dr. Natalia Polozmak has researched various tattooed mummies from the Pazyryk culture. She noticed that every single mummy found with only one tattoo had that same tattoo on their left shoulder. This is definitely significant, but Dr. P never figured out why. It may have been like an Iron Age starter pack for tattoos. Everyone got the first one on their left shoulder, but most people didn't go back for seconds. Except for the Ice Princess, who went back for seconds and thirds. Death, weed, and mystery. Okay, so you've got a fabulously wealthy princess. She's gorgeous, she rides horses, maybe she can shoot an apple out of the sky with an arrow at a gallop. But how did she die so young, at only 25? I know the average lifespan was a lot lower in ancient times, but 25 is still really young. In the 90s, archaeologists didn't know. Her organs and brain had been removed in an ancient embalming process, so they couldn't be analyzed. Scientists really didn't have a way of determining death. It took 20 years for technology to catch up. Finally, scientists recently submitted the Ice Maiden for MRI scans, which revealed a rather shocking cause of death. Turns out, our lovely cold weather princess died from breast cancer. You thought breast cancer was a modern demon, but it's been around for a very long time. Dr. Andrei Ledyagin of the Russian Academy of Sciences spotted signs of a tumor in her right breast and damage from a fall, possibly off a horse, shortly before her death. Scientists suspect the pain must have been intense. She could hardly keep herself in the saddle at the end. So how do you suppose a 25-year-old princess coped with immense pain before prescription painkillers? Just like how tattoos have been around forever, so have certain pain management herbs. Marijuana found in her tomb suggests that the Ice Maiden self-medicated by smoking. It's the same thing cancer sufferers do today all over the world. Wait, is that a wig? When archaeologists were done poking and prodding and asking a million times what her tattoos mean to her, they peeked under the elaborate headdress she was found wearing. But there was no hair. The team had expected locks of beautiful black hair. Instead, they found a head as bald as Mr. Clean. The experts think she shaved her head, replacing her natural hair with a 2-layer wig. And at the very top of her wig was a felt spike adorned with 15 gold foil birds. You know, to complete the look. This woman would make head turns even today. Walking around with a bunch of gold foil birds strapped to your head would make quite the impression. She also had a cosmetics bag with blue-green eyeliner in it made of vivianite, aka iron sulfate. This suggests the princess was concerned about her appearance on the go. She would have carried the cosmetics bag with her on long journeys, So of course she took it to the afterlife too, where she also wanted to look fabulous. The locals are not amused. The Ice Maiden is amazing, both for her tattoos and her wig. I mean, everything about her is pretty awesome. But should she have been dug up in the first place? Because the locals were not very happy about the whole situation. The Altai people saw her as an ancestor. Disturbing her grave was to them a spiritual violation. How would you like it if I went and dug up your great-grandfather's grave and took a bunch of pictures of him? Local shamans warned of dire consequences. And then, when the Ice Maiden went on tour to Korea and Japan, the Altai flipped out. They were furious to have their ancestor displayed. Public outcry led to the area becoming a zone of peace, banning further excavations. And after a lot of back and forth and a lot of bickering, she was returned to the Altai Museum. Researchers still study her remains, but at least she's home. As for other Ice Maidens, since digging is now illegal in the area, if there are more, they will remain in their icy tombs for now. The tattoos come back to life. Over 30 years have gone by since all this transpired, and over that time, her tattoos have faded. They went from bright blue to invisible. So a scientist recently busted out high-resolution near-infrared photography to bring them back to life. But they accidentally revealed even more tattoos than the first investigation. The new images showed a full forearm sleeve of leopards and tigers hunting deer, a rooster on her thumb, and a griffin attacking a stag on her left arm. Tattoo artist Daniel Rade, who helped study the images, called the hunting scene a masterpiece. He said it would have taken 2 4 to 5 hour sessions to complete. Now that is an impressive tattoo, especially since it wasn't done with any modern instruments. Her tattoos were done stick and poke style, using soot mixed with animal fat as ink, applied with clusters of thorns or metal needles. Sounds a little too painful if you ask me. Legacy of a frozen princess. The Ice Maiden's discovery was an archaeological jackpot, a time capsule of human vanity, art, medicine, and ritual. Why did the princess have so many tattoos? What did they symbolize in her ancient culture? And was she even a princess? What was her name? Sorry, I just have too many questions and not enough answers. This frozen maiden proved that ancient people valued self-expression as much as we do today, and that tattoos, makeup, wigs, and even cannabis have deep ancient roots. Her story also raises more important questions, like, is archaeology glorified grave robbing? Is digging a woman out of her frozen tomb a breakthrough for science or a violation of the dead? Let me know your thoughts about this. And now for a quick break because it's shout-out time. I want to give a big thank you to Unintended Consequence for this super thanks. It really means a lot, and thanks for letting us be a part of your day. If you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out. The Ice Age Cold Case. You've heard of murder on the Orient Express, but what about murder on the Alpine Express? In 1991, 2 German hikers trudging through the Tyrolean Alps on the Austrian-Italian border stumbled across what they thought was a recent mountaineering tragedy. A body poking out of the melting ice nearly gave them a heart attack. I mean, it would give you a heart attack too. The hikers assumed that someone like them had wandered off course, gotten stuck, and froze to death. Tragic, yes, but not unusual. Except that this was unusual. This was no modern hiker who bit off more than they could chew. This guy was ancient, frozen solid with a copper axe. How many mountaineers do you know who use primitive copper tools? This frozen man would soon become a legend. He's known today as Otzi, the most famous human icicle in the world. He's the closest we have ever come to finding an actual caveman in a block of ice. And for that, you've got to raise a glass to Otzi. He is a 5,300-year-old celebrity corpse. Years after his discovery, scientists would figure out he was also a victim of murder. Someone had shot him in the back with an arrow, piercing his shoulder and slicing through an artery. As Otzi made his way through the snowy mountains, presumably fleeing from whoever shot him, he bled out from his wound. By the time he succumbed to his injury, he was way, way up in the mountains. So when he died, instead of rotting away like a normal person, the mountain's ice turned him into Europe's most famous popsicle. Today, Otzi has his own refrigerated VIP suite in the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology in Bolzano, Italy. He pulls in about 300,000 visitors a year. He's also got his own research fan club, his own genome sequence, and as you'll see in a second, more tattoos than a midlife crisis Harley rider. CSI Copper Age. When scientists first got their hands and scalpels on Otzi, they found a forensic jackpot. They looked in his belly and identified his last meal as dried ibex and deer meat with einkorn wheat bread. How's that for a last supper? Then they turned their attention to his gear. Otzi's copper axe came from distant Tuscany. His clothes were a prehistoric mashup of fashion and function. He had fur, grass, and leather clothing all stitched together. This guy was a fashion scavenger, pulling together whatever he could get his mitts on. Once the experts were done analyzing his closet, they turned to his DNA. A new cell genomic study used ultra-modern sequencing to reveal the truth of who this man really was. And oh boy, the results are amazing. Your friendly neighborhood caveman had dark eyes and skin darker than modern Sicilians. You often see Otzi depicted in reconstructions as a pale man, but he would have had dark skin more similar to the Egyptians and the Greeks. This new study also revealed a sad story regarding the man's head. It didn't have much hair on it. Otzi was balding in his mid-40s thanks to male pattern baldness genes. It's something a lot of men can relate to all these years later. But what you probably can't relate to is his family tree. Otzi's genes prove he was 90% Anatolian farmer, a descendant of agricultural pioneers who trekked from modern-day Turkey into Europe about 9,000 years ago. Who needs Ancestry.com when you can just study a frozen guy's DNA? Life wasn't a spa day. Keep in mind that life was no picnic 5,300 years ago. Otzi didn't spend his days sipping herbal tea and meditating in a mountain hut. His body is a greatest hits album of ancient injuries and diseases. It's a miracle he lived into his 40s. Scientists found broken ribs and a broken nose, and his mouth was a dental disaster zone with more cavities than a candy store. He also suffered a knife wound to the hand. This wound may have come from a fight days before his murder, presumably with whoever shot him in the back. What was this fight club in the Alps? What's going on out there? Otzi also suffered from gallstones, gum disease, and genetic risk for cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. This was a man living on hard mode, and yet he still made time for 61 tattoos, the oldest ink in the world. Otzi's tattoos are phenomenal. They are fantastic, stupendous, and more than just decoration. They are officially the oldest known tattoos on the planet. Forget the sleeves and the tribal bands you see at every single gym across America. Otzi's body art is nuts. It's a bunch of parallel lines and crosses inked into his lower back, legs, and wrist. Whereas the Ice Maiden of Russia had tattoos of hunting scenes all over her body and tattoos of what seemed to be snapshots from Scythian myths, Otzi is an enigma. His tats are all obscure and abstract and vague. Not to mention, his tattoos were found in places that would have been covered by clothing. Were they supposed to be seen? Were they symbolic, medical, ritual, spiritual, just for fun? Maybe if we shake him hard enough, he'll wake up and tell us. Tattoo artists versus archaeologists. For years, researchers assumed that Otzi's tattoos were made using a very specific technique. And that technique involved slicing open the skin and then rubbing charcoal in the wound. If they did that at a tattoo shop today, I think someone would get sued. But then came an experiment that changed everything. Aaron Dater-Wolf, prehistoric archaeologist and fan of unconventional methods, teamed up with traditional tattooist Danny Rade. Together, they set out to learn how exactly Otzi got inked. Danny became the guinea pig, tattooing his own leg with tools made of animal bone, obsidian, copper, boar tusk, and steel needles. I didn't even realize getting tattooed with boar tusk was an option. Do you have to pay extra for that? Danny tried cutting his skin and rubbing in pigment. He tried hand poking tiny holes in his flesh, and he tried tapping ink in with tools, which is still a fairly popular traditional method of tattooing. Over 6 months, the team tracked Rade's healing process under a digital microscope. Then they compared the results to UV and high-resolution images of Otzi's tattoos. And the verdict was indisputable. Altsai's tattoo lines had rounded edges, stippling, and all the classic signs of puncture tattooing. Danny and the team think that based on all their experiments and all the available data, that Altsai was tattooed using the puncture method and used either a sharp bone or a copper awl. Cool, right? But even cooler is that Altsai may have been his own tattoo artist. When Altsai was found, he had a bunch of belongings on him and spread around in the ice. Among his belongings was a sharply pointed bone. Archaeologists have never been able to say for certain what the bone was for. But with all this new information, it's looking like the bone could have been part of Altsai's personal tattoo kit. Maybe he tattooed himself randomly. I mean, obviously we wish he'd left a catalog explaining what all the lines and swirls and random sigils mean. He almost looks like he's covered in sacred alchemical formulas or something. Ink, pain, and acupuncture. Why would you get tattoos if you were living in a freezing mountain death zone? One possibility is that you would do it for medical reasons. One of the top theories explaining Altsai's tattoos is that they were for acupuncture. Weird, right? But it actually does make sense. The thing is, his tattoos line up with traditional acupuncture points. They also sit on particularly hard-working body parts, suggesting the lines and dots indicate areas for pain treatments for his joints and muscles. Some ancient healer may have bent over our caveman in some cavernous massage parlor, jabbing him with acupuncture bone needles. Given what I told you earlier about his health record, that is totally plausible. Then again, maybe the tattoos were supposed to unlock his chakras or realign his chi. I wasn't there, I don't know. What's your guess for the purpose of all this? The quest for more icemen. Scientists want more icemen. They want more caveman popsicles, and they want to study more ancient tattoos. Expert Albert Zink from the Urach Institute for Mummy Studies is on the case. He and others like him are currently hunting for more people from Altsai's era in South Tyrol and Trentino, Italy. So far, they have found about 100 skeletons, but no other mummies. And that is a huge bummer. Their goal is to figure out if Altsai was a typical alpine farmer or something else entirely. Was he an average man 5,300 years ago? Now that you know his story, it doesn't seem like he was all that normal, does it? Fleeing from a murderer into the mountains isn't something that normal people do. Scientists suspect he may have been the Copper Age's tattooed, bald, introverted outlier, like some cave version of James Bond or something. But they can't confirm anything until they find more bodies. And so far, they haven't found any. Until another caveman in a block of ice is found, Altsai remains one of archaeology's most fascinating mysteries. He was a man who survived the harsh Alps, ate like a mountain goat, fought, got tattooed, went bald, and died dramatically, only to become the most famous ice cube in history. Why do you think Altsai was murdered? Let me know your thoughts in the comments and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Ink from the Afterlife. An 800-year-old Peruvian mummy has better tattoos than you do. In the dim, climate-controlled hush of a high-tech laboratory, a mummy had her moment in the spotlight. Literally. A beam of violet laser light swept across her shriveled hand, and suddenly, she lit up like a nightclub on Saturday night. Geometric patterns glowed brightly on her skin. Scales, vines, and what looked suspiciously like an animal with a curly tail shined beneath centuries of decay. These were amazing tattoos found on the hand of someone who died before the Inca ever established an empire. Not just any someone either. This was a powerful woman who belonged to the Chankay culture. She, along with a few select others, went to their graves with some of the finest ink in the ancient world. Tattoos so old and delicate, it's hard to believe they're real. They are just now being studied, and already they are giving experts an intimate glimpse into one of Peru's most incredible lost cultures. And they've got enough of them to go around. The Chankay culture. Very little is known about the Chankay civilization. They appeared around the year 1000 AD in the valleys of Fortaleza, Pativilca, Supe, and others along Peru's central coast. They showed up, rather conveniently, shortly after the fall of the Wadi civilization, who had dominated Peru for 500 years prior. They lived in the desert, had farms, traded with other regions, and had a vibrant culture. They built earthenware, painted stuff, and crafted dolls. You know, humans doing human stuff. Then things sort of went sideways in the early 1400s. The Chankay were rapidly and practically effortlessly overrun and conquered by the Chimu culture, who, like a fish that eats a smaller fish only to be gobbled up by a shark, were then defeated by the Inca. By 1450, the Inca dominated the Chankay's lands and the Chimu's lands, and the pecking order was settled. The Chankay were forgotten, their traditions, their dead, their cities, all abandoned to be reclaimed by the desert. The 800-year-old mummy with the tattooed hand was part of the Chankay culture at their peak, 200 years after they settled the valleys and 200 years before the Chimu sent them into timeout. But who was she, and what do her tattoos mean? Modern tech meets ancient ink. Researchers discovered these tattoos when they embarked on a mission to study over 100 mummies from the Chankay culture. All of them were tattooed. However, only a tiny number had intricate tattoos with fine details. The rest were kind of splotchy, like a Rorschach test. To study the woman's hand tattoos, scientists used a dusty magnifying glass. Kidding, they used an advanced new technology called laser stimulated fluorescence, or LSF for short. It's a technique normally reserved for fossils. Think of it like CSI's UV crime scene lights, but turned up to ridiculous levels. By blasting the woman's skin with a 405 nanometer laser, researchers could make the ink fluoresce. It was like beaming a spotlight on someone to make their tattoos turn glow in the dark. This laser revealed lines as fine as 0.1 millimeters, which is narrower than what today's best tattoo machines can do. In other words, this woman has tattoos more advanced than yours, and she got them without a tattoo gun. The LSF images stripped away centuries of ink bleed and decay, reconstructing the designs as they looked when they were fresh. Michael Pittman, a paleobiologist at the Chinese University of Hong Kong and lead author of the study, said this: "We were shocked by just how fine the tattoo lines were in our LSF images. We immediately knew what we were seeing was special." But how? Really, how did they do it? How did they create such thin ink lines? And why were they so obsessed with tattoos? Michael Pittman pointed out that on some pieces of Chankay pottery, there are human figures sculpted with tattoo designs. These people were making bowls and cups and mugs and then drawing tattooed characters on them. Now that is a serious commitment. Yes, the Chankay are known for their textile wizardry and pottery skills, but these tattoos are beyond mere body art. They are a masterclass in tattooing methods. But scientists can't even figure out what those methods were. The skill was unparalleled. The tattoo detail surpassed anything else in Chankay artwork, suggesting that these pieces of skin art were made by master specialists. And not everyone in the culture got this privilege. You had to be someone of some social standing to earn your ink. Status, spirits, and needles. Out of the over 100 mummified Chankay specimens examined, only a limited few had tattoos this awesome. Like I said, most had vague, blurry marks that looked like they were done by a drunk friend at a bonfire. Why did some Chankay people get the good ink while others got the discount stuff? Archaeologists aren't sure, but they do have the usual suspects. Maybe it was due to social rank. In these kinds of situations, it's almost always a social thing. Nobility, popular shamans, nobles, kings, queens, they all would have had access to the best tattooists. Meanwhile, the peasants were stuck with the bargain bin. Then again, maybe the tattoos were tied to spiritual beliefs. Maybe it was just really expensive and not everyone could afford it. There is even a chance they served a therapeutic purpose, like the tattoos on Altai the Iceman. Remember how I said his tats may have been pain relief points, like acupuncture marks left with a permanent marker? The same could be said for the Peruvian mummy, which would be insane considering not only the difference in age, but the immense distance between the two cultures. Altai was in the mountains of Europe, while this mummy was found in the desert coast of Peru. However the woman's ink functioned, the designs clearly took a lot of time, heaps of patience, and some very fine tools. Scientists suspect that considering how thin the lines are, cactus needles may have been used instead of sharpened bones. You think you've sat through a painful tattoo session? Try doing it without numbing cream, with a cactus spine, and no chance of scrolling your phone to distract yourself. Mummies under the laser. The LSF technique used to reveal these tattoos is more than just a cool party trick for archaeologists. It's a genuine breakthrough. Before this technology, researchers relied on infrared imaging to spot ancient tattoos. The results were better than naked eye viewing, but still fuzzy, like trying to watch Netflix on dial-up. LSF changes the game big time. By making the pigment fluoresce, it reveals what time and decomposition have blurred, showing the tattoos as sharper than anything seen before. This study was the first time LSF was applied to ancient tattoos, and the success means it could be used worldwide on other mummified remains. Michael Pittman is extremely optimistic, and so am I. Michael said that hopefully we can push back the complexity of ancient tattoos even further back in time. I can't wait to see all the new mummy tattoos as scientists and museums get their hands on LSF equipment. How far back do you think tattooing goes? Will they find evidence of tattoos on Neanderthals? Bog bodies? The possibilities with this new technology are endless. Thanks to lasers, ancient art is no longer fading away into the dark. Tattoos from prehistory are now lighting up again for the world to see. Thanks for watching. If you had to copy one tattoo from one of these mummies, which tattoo would you choose? Otzi's acupuncture dots, the Ice Maiden's griffin, or the Peruvian mummies? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon. Bye!